on docket number 0267, order that the Boston Planning and Development Agency continue biannual urban renewal updates to the Boston City Council. My name is Michelle Wu, and I chair our Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation, and am pleased to be here today with many representatives from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. So just review for our audience, this is now our third, I believe, update with the BPDA following the City Council's March 2016 approval of a 6-year extension to the 14 urban renewal zones and the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development's approval of our approval on August 3rd, 2016. So the part of that agreement was an update every 6 months to understand the progress towards the land disposition agreement, inventory, and other pieces. And we're excited to be back here again in our new chamber with you all. So, Director Golden, I'll just hand it over to you. I see we have a multi-inch thick presentation, so we'll be here for a while. But good morning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back with you today. Thank you for your time and through you to the committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you once again about urban renewal. I'd especially like to welcome the new members of the City Council to the urban renewal conversation. As we approach the 2-year mark after the Commonwealth's Department of Housing and Community Development and City Council urban renewal extension approvals, we would like to provide an overview of our progress to date. This is our third City Council update, as you pointed out. It was agreed to by an action plan that the Boston Planning and Development Agency and the City Council arrived at, and I'm happy to report that we are on track with our commitments. The majority of our work thus far has been centered around the Urban Renewal Land Disposition Agreement Inventory Project. Once again, land disposition agreements, LDAs, are regulatory devices that the agency placed upon parcels, sometimes through agreements that are separate and apart from a deed, sometimes through agreements, restrictions on deeds themselves. Parcels that the agency at one point took ownership of and subsequently conveyed are long-term leased for development are often the subject of these land disposition agreement LDAs that restrict or otherwise govern the use of these parcels that we once had control over. The results of that LDA inventory project will once again be presented here today. Joining me for the update are Renee Lefebvre to my right. Renee is our General Counsel at the BPDA. To my left is Janet Carlson, the First Assistant General Counsel at the BPDA. And to Janet's left is Allison Quinn, Special Project Manager for Urban Renewal. In addition, Records Manager Nate Smith, Legal Assistants Joe Rose Bordeaux and Alec Bonelli, and Urban Renewal interns Ben Taylor, Bianca Chacon, and Martin Serrano have all made significant contributions to the Urban Renewal LDA inventory project, and we at the agency certainly thank them for their hard work on behalf of not only the agency but the people of Boston. As background for those of you who may not be familiar with this topic, urban renewal dates back to the American Housing Act of 1949, when the federal government began to invest significant sums of money to redevelop cities that were rapidly deteriorating with the suburbanization of the nation after World War II. The Boston Redevelopment Authority was created as Boston's urban renewal agency in 1957. And since 1974, the Department of Housing and Community Development of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has overseen urban renewal activities within the city of Boston. While urban renewal has many negative associations historically, I'd like to reiterate a point that we have made frequently, both here at the City Council and externally with the people of Boston in their communities. Urban renewal today is a much different tool It is used in a far different fashion than it was during the 50s and 60s and 70s. And we as an agency exercise these powers in a much more sophisticated, sensitive, and limited manner. Urban Renewal provides us with a set of tools that encourage responsible redevelopment and revitalization of Boston's neighborhoods where, but for these tools, development may not have otherwise been possible. The powers are used to make blight findings, assemble parcels of land for development, clear title of land to establish clear ownership, establish land use controls for uses such as open space and the promotion of affordable housing. As you may recall, the Boston City Council approved a 6-year extension of our urban renewal plans in March 2016. In April 2016, the Boston Planning and Development Agency's board approved an action plan, a requirement of the 6-year urban renewal extension, providing additional Boston City Council oversight of our urban renewal activity. On August 3, 2016, the state's Department of Housing and Community Development approved our request to extend our urban renewal powers in plan areas that cover parts of Charlestown, the Fenway, Chinatown, the South End, Roxbury, the downtown waterfront, the West End, North Station area, and Government Center for another 6 years until 2022. This will allow the BPDA to move forward with the action plan. DHCD's approval came after we facilitated a robust 1.5-year-long public engagement process to inform residents of Boston about the history of urban renewal and to solicit feedback about the future use of these tools. This effort included over a dozen community workshops, public meetings before the Boston City Council, and a comprehensive website to inform the public. We are committed to transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. And to that end, the Boston Planning and Development Agency continues to update its website to reflect urban renewal activity requiring Boston Planning and Development Agency board action. Now, a word on the so-called minor modification procedures associated with urban renewal. We are notifying the City Council and the state's Department of Housing and Community Development of all minor modifications to our urban renewal areas. Per the conciliation agreement for the South End, notification of minor modifications within the South End urban renewal plan area are also extended to state legislators that represent that area impacted by the minor modifications proposed. We've also been providing the Boston City Council with digital copies of all minor modification notices via email transmission. The urban renewal team at the BPDA continues to collect granular data in an effort to prevent a comprehensive inventory of all the land disposition agreements. Since the completion of the South End urban renewal area in the last City Council update in 2017, this team has completed the LDA inventory of South Cove, Park Plaza, Fenway, Washington Park, Kittredge Square, and the Campus High School urban renewal areas. These 6 urban renewal areas will be presented today, again demonstrating our commitment to meeting the milestones set forth in the action plan. The remaining urban renewal areas left for us to inventory are Charlestown, the West End, and the downtown waterfront. We anticipate completing the LDA inventory of these areas by late spring of this year. As the LDA inventory project continues, the project team has been carefully thinking through the most effective and efficient way to present the data on an accessible online format by urban renewal plan area, type of restriction, and use. The Boston Planning and Development Agency urban renewal team has been working with our GIS department to provide online access to urban renewal information through the BPDA's zoning viewer. Upon completion of all urban renewal plan areas, this team will ensure that this online tool is functioning optimally prior to going live. Upon completion of the Urban Renewal LDA inventory project, we will be able to thoroughly audit BPDA-owned land, an additional formalized commitment that we made in the action plan to the Boston City Council. Once this title audit of BPDA parcels has concluded, BPDA staff will reevaluate boundaries to make recommendations for modifications to existing urban renewal plan areas and explore the notion of new urban renewal plan areas. The action plan also requires the agency to examine our existing procedures for the disposition of BPDA-owned land and to revise protocols accordingly in such a manner that reflects community planning goals and priorities. We've reviewed existing procedures surrounding disposition of our land and made refinements to those procedures to ensure transparency. All urban renewal land dispositions involve a community process that solicits feedback from the surrounding neighborhood stakeholders. This feedback is then incorporated into community planning goals and priorities. Finally, I'd like to update you on a topic we discussed specifically in 2017 when we last appeared before the Council, involving the disposition of an urban renewal parcel in Chinatown, the so-called parcel P12 on Tremont Street on the edge of Chinatown. After a robust community process during the fall of 2017, the Boston Planning and Development Agency received in January of this year a submittal from 288 Tremont Street LLC, a collaborative entity of the Asian Community Development Corporation, Corcoran Jennison Companies, Millennium Boston, and Tufts Shared Services for the redevelopment of Parcel 12C in Chinatown and the South Cove urban renewal area of Boston. The proposal envisions the expansion of the DoubleTree Hotel, which currently has 140 rooms, the creation of 171 rental and home ownership units, 100% of which will be income restricted, and a community space that it is currently envisioned to become the Chinatown permanent branch of the Boston Public Library, a new community landmark, we hope. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to Janet Carlson, our first Deputy General Counsel. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning. So I'm going to go through lots of slides. I thought first I'd recap the prior City Council LDA updates for those new members so they know what we've already covered in case they want information. Okay, so the first thing I have here is a slide of the original urban renewal areas, and this is an old slide from 2003, so the district boundaries are not correct. We have a later slide that will have them correct, but this shows you some of the ones that have expired. So these are the 16 existing urban renewal plan areas, and you may wonder why we extended 14 and we have 16. 2 didn't need extending. North Station expires in 2020, and then there's West End. These are the ones that have expired, some of which were earlier and some have happened since the 2005. Okay, this is the new district boundaries with the present urban renewal plans on them, so people can see which urban renewal plans are in their districts. Okay, and then in the first 2 updates, I've listed which urban renewal plans that we've covered. In the first update, we did Central Business District, School Franklin, Central Business District, Boylston, Essex, and Brunswick King. In the second update, we did Central Business District, South Station, North Station, Government Center, and South End. Okay. And just to give a little bit of the boundaries for people, originally, as I mentioned in earlier updates, there was a Central Business District urban renewal plan that was proposed, and the federal government said no. But we had done early property acquisitions as allowed by them, and so they created 4 little CBD, or Central Business District plans. And those are the ones I've been presenting. The other one we presented, Brunswick King, this is the boundaries of it. It's mainly public, a couple housing plans. This is the boundary for the North Station one that was presented previously. And this is the Government Center urban renewal area, and I use this plan because it shows it with the present streets. If I use the old plan, all the streets have been reconfigured and it would be hard to see. In addition, this plan is interesting because it shows the subway lines under City Hall Plaza and under the City Hall, so you can see what's under there. And then what we had done in prior updates is we had put some next steps, and I thought I'd go through and update a little of those. So on the Government Center one, we had City Hall Plaza. We are presently working on the permanent easement for the MBTA Government Center stop. We are working on licenses with GSA regarding the boundaries so that we can each do our improvements. In addition, GSA has agreed to cut the grass in front of their building, which is on City Hall Plaza. Pemberton Square, we're still working on. We've had a couple meetings. There's some issues about how it's being used and what it should be used for. So we're going to continue the meetings with the courthouse and with the City of Boston. On Public Realm, we laid out a sidewalk in front of Center Plaza, which was never there before, and there might be some other ones that I have to work on. And then the last one over on Union Street, there should be a transfer of that parcel that has the Holocaust in Union, and that cannot happen until Connect Historic Boston is finished, because we gave them licenses to do the work for Connect Historic Boston. So that'll be coming up. Okay, the next one, this is the South End boundaries. This is not the original boundaries. We did extend the lower part to cover crosstown many years ago, so this is the current boundaries for South End. And on this one, for next steps, we had prior to this said that we would be transferring some properties to Boston Natural Areas Network. They have now been taken over by the trustees of reservations. We've made 2 of those transfers, and I'm working on 2 more. Washington Street, we still have to deal with. We own a strip between the street and many of the parcels, which was left by the orange line of the T. We have some pedestrian easements to do. Notices of extensions of restrictions. In the late 80s, we started deed restricting some of our properties with restrictions that had terms of 30 years plus 20. Those type of restrictions started in 87, so we've started hitting those. And we've done 9 notices of extension since 87 to extend 44 units so far. I think 10 were in South End. I think 24 were in Roxbury, Dorchester, and I can't remember where the other, 10 were in Charlestown. Okay, now we'll start our update today. This is our new information. Okay, so we're going to do the 6 plans. We're going to start with Park Plaza. Some of them I will be going pretty much parcel to parcel, and some of them I'll just be giving a flavor for what it is and giving you some information on it. So the Park Plaza, this is the boundary. The Park Plaza should be noted, and I have it in the last slide as well, that this is the only state plan that's a state plan, has no federal involvement. And it's written quite different than the others, which I'll be explaining in a few minutes. And there's less parcels. So the parcels that are in Park Plaza are, we laid this out by their use. So there's residential, commercial, you can see. Then there's a lot of residential. But let me go through these slides because there aren't that many parcels. So this is the Arlington Hadassah subparcel of parcel 1. It's Heritage on the Garden. This is the Hadassah Charles subparcel of parcel 1, which is the Four Seasons Hotel. It also has residences, I believe. Parcel 2 is actually, so the first 2 were the only 2 we owned, I can't go backwards, the whole parcels. The rest of these you're going to see we only owned pieces of, so we only transferred pieces. This was a bunch of roads, so we had some discontinuances of roads. Oops, wait, not that one, this one, Charles Street, condominium on parcel 2. Okay, then we have the 45 Stewart. We only owned a few pieces, but we have an LDA over the whole site. This is an Emerson dorm. We only owned 146 Boylston, but we laid the LDA over the whole project. This is the one that had the NCAA basketball court in it as well. And this is the Kensington. This one, we took a few parcels, but we didn't own the whole site. We only did pieces of it. And lastly, this is not something we've transferred. The China Trade Building was redeveloped in the 80s with an urban renewal action grant by a private party. And when they were going to get foreclosed on, we purchased the China Trade Building in the early 90s and have owned it since. It's recently gone through a lot of updates, systems and everything. And I think, are we almost ready to, Brian, do you know if we're almost ready to totally lease it out now?
The building is about 85% leased. It's a remarkable success story because for a long time the building did not perform well with regard to tenancy. But not only has the building, we've invested a significant amount of capital in the building to improve it. We've attracted tenants, and the building's even got what we've really come to appreciate as a significant mission. Most of the tenancies are nonprofits. The International Institute, which provides educational services primarily to low-income immigrant populations. The Urban College of New England is also a tenant there, which provides higher education to primarily low-income residents of the city of Boston. So the building has had a 20-plus year history with the agency, but is beginning not only to perform well as a going business concern, but also in providing really significant services to the people of Boston.
Okay, and so we own that. The park in front we do not own. That's a city park. Okay, now on the Park Plaza Urban Renewal Plan, as I said, this is the only state-only plan. It is written different than the other plans. It says within it that changes in height and floor air ratios are major modifications, so you'll see a lot of major modifications coming through on the Park Plaza plan. It needs City Council and DHCD approval for those. The other thing that's strange about this is it seems to imply that these changes apply to all the private parcels that we never owned. And I can't say everyone's complied with that. I know Emerson has. You've seen the white building, I think about 2 years ago. It came through, it had a height change, and it came through as a major modification. But I can't say that every private parcel is complying with that, because I don't even know if we could really enforce that.
Legally enforce.
Yeah, exactly, because it was private. See, so that's Park Plaza. South Cove. South Cove is next to Park Plaza. It's kind of between like Bay Village area and Chinatown and Park Plaza. That's the plan, some of the parcels listed. This is some of the uses of what we've given out, and I'll go through some of these. Now, on a number of these, they're housing, and you'll see, so we started our form of deed restrictions right now in '87. So I'm going to list at the end of each of these the deed restricted ones that we have deed restricted since '87, so you'll see in each case. But a lot of the buildings you're going to see when they look older were probably financed through HUD and other sources and have a lot of affordable housing. I just don't know the numbers on them. So the Metropolitan, of course, that's a newer one. Then this is, it was done by Bradford Towers, but it's called South Cove Plaza East, and then there's South Cove Plaza, which is actually across a couple blocks away, but they were done at the same time by the same developer. Okay, they're housing. Riviera Hotel, which wasn't the Riviera Hotel originally, it had another name.
57? Wasn't that the 57?
Maybe. Then we have the W Hotel is a newer one. This one, we didn't own the whole parcel. This was just slivers. And we're on the hotel part, not the residence part. Tufts, New England. Tufts, we did a number of parcels. We did the parcel in the middle of the road and the one, if you're looking at the Tufts, to the right. On the left-hand side, we gave a couple properties under the garage. We have an LDA on the garage. But the parcel next to it, we gave some parcels out, but it doesn't really have an LDA on it. So we helped Tufts in this area. We've also done a number of land swaps over the years with them so that we get some parcels we want and Tufts gets the ones they want. Okay, so the next one is the community center on Tyler Street. And this is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is also the Jean Mayer Center for Nutrition Studies for the Aging or something. And I found that interesting. It's a federal government building. This is interesting because Brian was talking about parcel P-12C. So this is the parcel that's in front of it. So if you look at where this has 12, 12A, and 12B. This was formerly given out for the Don Bosco High School. In the 90s, it was, the high school went out and it was converted to the hotel as well as the YMCA. In that conversion, we swapped land. We gave them a piece of land that has actually if you look at the map, the part on the right up is actually where the Silver Line easement goes under. That's supposed to be, I guess, the portal that goes under. So that's supposed to remain open space. And we gave them that land, and then we took back some other land around the hotel to make a more developable parcel. And that's the one that we put out recently that Brian was talking about. Okay, this is the Josiah Quincy School. We did. So you can see there's a number of public uses. This is the Elliott Norton Park, which is also public. We did a firehouse on Columbus Avenue. And this is CCBA Taitang. So see, this is quite large, lots of units in there. And across the street from it is a little Taitang Park, which I went by the other day, and it's AstroTurf, it looks like. Looks like it's not grass. This is Maywa Village. Maywa Village is a deed restricted since the 80s. So we have some deed restricted units. Oak Terrace is a newer one that has deed restricted units.
And are these are all the 30 plus 20, or?
Yes, I list the terms as well,
okay.
so you'll be able to see. Yeah, we put the terms in. The only time we really do in perpetuity is when we get the state involved, because the law says that we can't do it unless we get state approval. We are actually working on that, because I've heard recently D&D got some state approval for in perpetuity, and then we should be able to follow because of the IDP money. We should both be getting the same terms. So we'll be approaching the state and trying to get that as well. But the ones that are already out will be under the terms that they have. Okay. The next one, this is the Boston Chinese Evangelical Church as it presently exists. It's proposed to be, I guess, do a new building or something. They have an annex next door. Quincy Tower, of course, was on urban renewal land. You can see how many of these were on urban renewal land. And these bigger projects, it was totally urban renewal land, not just slivers. Mass Pike Towers is on urban renewal land. CCBA Tremont Village. And then I listed residential uses, but on the next page I should have the affordable list. So if you look at the affordable list, remember we have the deed restrictions just since like 87 or so. So there's lots of other affordable housing in here, but it was mainly controlled by HUD and those that financed. And I'm sure, I know some of them, like Quincy, where was it? Was it Quincy Towers? Was in the other year to do some work, so I think they're refinancing to keep the affordability. So if you look, I put how many there are, and because they all use different terms, I put what the income was. Because some use low, some use very low for the same thing. So I put what it was, and then at the end I put the terms. So you can see the in perpetuity, and the reason for the in perpetuity is in that restriction, it's not just a restriction to the BRA, it's to several agencies, so we had a state agency in there that we could lay an in perpetuity over. But the ones that are just us would have just the 30 plus 20. Okay, so that's South Cove. Fenway. Okay, so Fenway is a little bit different. It's got a number of parcels, and Brian was talking about land disposition agreements, but some of the ones in the Fenway have what's called regulatory agreements. So back when we were doing urban renewal, there were a few projects around town that we did not get in and take the land. We let private parties transfer the land among themselves, but then we laid a document over called a regulatory agreement that basically looks identical to a land disposition agreement in that it restricts the use, the sale, all of that, but it doesn't have terms for the purchase of the land, like the money and the transfer. So those two sections are missing from them. Okay, and I'll go through and I'll show you some of those. Okay, the next one shows the uses. So the first one listed here, this is a newer project. We only transferred slivers of this. This was originally a regulatory agreement, the Colonnade. It was a huge block. It was actually the whole block. Then in the 90s, I believe, they came back. And I believe the part that you're going to see in the next slide was open space, and it became the Colonnade Residences. And when we did this, we redid the documentation on it, and they both are LDA/regulatory agreements. So they cover the whole site, though, and they control it. And whenever we go and we do new documents, like in the 90s or whatever, we will put a new term on them. We usually do 40, we do for the term of the plan as may be extended, or 40 years from the date hereof. In the 90s, I think we were doing 20 years, but as we got to 2000, we started doing 40. So the newer ones would have longer terms just in case the plans don't get, but we'd lose all the old ones. Okay, the next one here is Symphony East and West. These are the ones that are kind of across from Symphony Hall. They are on Huntington and Mass Ave. There is an issue on this. I've listed it in the steps to be followed. So the buildings are, of course, the developers, but in front of each, there are plazas. They're kind of sunk in, and they have commercial around them. They also have the T-stops there. And so the BRA owns those, and we shouldn't. Actually, where they should go are, there was handicap access. Those should go to the building owners. Then we have to check with Public Improvements Commission, see what they need for the streets, and then the T needs their access. So we need to get the three parties that should own it together and decide how the parcel should get divided, do the proper survey work, and get our authorities for transfer. But that, of course, would not be any RFP. That's just straightening out the public realm areas. So that has to be done yet. Okay, the next project is St. Botolph. This was done in the early 2000s and has deed restricted units. This is across the street. This is St. Botolph Terrace, which is an older project. And one of my architects I was talking to this morning said they did some rehab work, I think, in this recently, or in the past couple years. This building is Church Park, that long building. And you can tell, you can always tell when they're like the 60s and 70s with a lot of cement. But it says commercial on the bottom and then residential up top. Behind it is the Whole Foods, another cement. Then we have next to the Church Park is the Carolina. We have affordable units in this, or at least one, maybe two. I think two. It's going to be on the list. Moorville House is actually behind Church Park. And then we have a couple parks. We have Symphony Community Park. It's a city-owned park, and that's back behind it. And then we have the Edgerly Road Playground, which is also city-owned. And when we deed it to the city, we don't lay LDAs. We just deed it to the city. If it's for a specific purpose, we might put that in the document. Like if it's for agriculture, we did that recently. I don't know if I have it on this one, but it's in one of the later plans. Okay, and then we have, okay, this is a strange one. This is way out. So this is parcel 24. This was formerly the Boston English High School. Okay, welcome. This is Boston English High School, and we acquired it from the city, and we gave it out to Harvard Medical School. And this is Symphony Road Garden. This is not a city garden. This is BNAN, which is probably now Trustees of Reservations. Now, I haven't given you all the parcels. There's a few more. There's like the firehouse on Boylston Street that the ICA used to be in. That's ours, but I just gave you a flavor for it. And these are the deed restrictions. Remember, this is from the late 80s on that were in that area. Most of the transfers were made prior to that. Okay. And so the next steps, I really think we need to fix those plazas in front of Symphony East and West. Okay, the next thing, Campus High School. Campus High School was like everything. We took a lot of property here. And what's interesting about this plan, this is the original plan. If you look at the roads here, you can see what they thought they were doing. They were putting all the highways in. That is not what happened. You'll see in the next plan, it became one road, Tremont Street. But the plan was to do the highways. Okay, and this is also, I'm going to go through a lot, but well, pretty much all of them I will go through, I think. So you can see there's a lot of public here, some open space and housing. A lot of the housing, especially to the upper right, is Madison Park, and you'll see here. Okay, so first we'll go through open spaces. This is Jeep Jones Park, which is down next to the Islamic Center, which we'll come to in a few minutes. We gave property to the Commonwealth for the Roxbury Heritage State Park. This is, I know they used that name a couple times in Roxbury. This is the park that's on the, what is it? The Malcolm X Boulevard. Okay. I know they've used on that. This is Justin, I think it's Gordon Park. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. This is that little parcel that's in the middle of the roads, if you look at the plan. Okay. Now, these are the high schools. There's two of them on that big parcel. Okay, and the post office is Another U.S. government one we did, that's down next to the high schools. Then we have the Reggie Lewis Center that we gave to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's the Reggie Lewis Track and Athletic Center. Okay. Then the only thing so far that's been developed on parcel P3 is P3I, which is the Whittier Street Health Center, up right behind the Reggie Lewis Track Center. And in doing this, like, we had to do all sorts of things. There's actually a road between the two buildings that doesn't look like a road. There is an NSTAR substation behind this building, like behind Reggie Lewis, that we have to keep access to. Okay, this is the Good Shepherd Church of God in Christ, which is behind P3. The Islamic Center, I should have put it on the other side, but it's, I put the churches together, so religious organizations together. This is next to the Jeep Jones Park on Malcolm X. Now this one, this is the old BHA, Whittier Street Residences. And this actually, I don't think we gave the property out. I could be wrong, but I think we never owned it. But we made an urban renewal parcel a few years ago because of a choice grant. So one of the things I'm going to explain in this area is the use of urban renewal overlay districts, or what we call U designations or U districts. And if you have an urban renewal plan, one thing you can do is you can help with some zoning issues and make it a little bit easier for certain developments by doing an urban renewal overlay. And what we do is we go through a process, and then we recommend to the zoning commission votes it. But the key is the zoning is through a document with the BRA. So when we lay this out, we have to have a document. So what I did on this project was I laid a regulatory agreement out with the BHA. And this is the one that we applied for a choice grant. Well, let me show you the other two. These also, and I didn't show you pictures because they're about to be redeveloped, and what's there now is a community center, but it's going to be 16 units of housing. This is going to be 6 units of housing. We've discontinued Brook Marshall Road at the top, and the housing's going to go up, and there's going to be a access road in the middle. It's not a road, probably a driveway. These all are under the U designation. They're all part of the choice. But this is the boundary for the urban renewal overlay district. So in each one of these parcels, we have to have agreements on the use. Urban renewal overlay districts do not give you all of your zoning. It gives you your use, dimensional, parking, and loading. If there's like a groundwater, a GCOD, groundwater overlay, conservation, whatever. If it's a ground, thank you. If it's groundwater, you still have to do that. But those 4 uses are pretty big. And this was very useful in applying for the HUD grant because you had to say that they had all of their approvals and all their permits. And this got them to that point. So that's why we used it. Okay, now we're going to do Madison Park. Madison Park has all of those properties around it, and a lot of them are together, so I'll just kind of flash through these. But Madison Park 3 townhomes, they're like scattered throughout. These were all given out a long time ago, but we've recently updated all of the LDAs. Oh, and going back just a second, if I can go back here. So when we did the urban renewal overlay on these properties here, we had LDAs, and I redid all of them and updated them and extended them. So all those that we did there. Okay, so these are all the Madison Park 3 townhomes. They're all scattered. You can see where the sites are jumping around. They're all the lower buildings. This is part of Madison Park 3, but it's the community center. They're doing some work on this now, I believe. They're doing a lot of rehabilitation in this area. Madison Park 4, I think they may have already done some work on this one. See, I'm looking for more. Haynes House has come in right now. They want to do new systems, and I think they're going to do a new exterior too. This one's already under construction as far as rehabbing. Okay, and this one is not Madison Park. This is actually on the other side over by the Roxbury Heritage Park that we have. It's a nonprofit. And this is a residential commercial that's behind that area. Okay, this the only deed restricted unit that we deed restrict here is this one, which is Burrell Garden, which is behind the post office. But there's lots of affordability because all of those with Madison Park are all, levels of affordability through other restrictions. Okay, and this one, I think there's some streets over by Burrell Garden that we have to research that we probably need to give the underlying fees to the city. I think they've been laid out, but we need to check on that. That's one thing we need to research. Okay, next is Kittredge Square. Okay. And this is the boundaries. If you look here, it's pretty much open space and residential. That's what it is. It's a small urban renewal area. Oh, and the green, there's a green on the right-hand side that shouldn't be green. It's city-owned now by foreclosure. It's not a park. It's a foreclosed parcel. I checked that this morning. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay, so this is, I'm not doing every parcel in these last two. I'm just giving you a flavor for what they are. There's people's houses, their backyards. I'm not going to show you those. So just to give you an idea, this is a community garden that we gave to Boston Natural Areas Network, which I assume is trustees of reservation now. And that's another one that was a BNA on one. This is one that this is the 78 Alva Kittredge. We have just have an idea. This one is just a sense of what kind of properties. Some are old, some are new. This is a newer one, Highland Park 2, probably in the past 10, 15 years. It's another. This is an old BHA-owned one. See, it's mainly housing and open space. And these are the affordable housing that I could find when I went through all the LDAs and searched them and their terms. Okay. And you can see these are all the 30 plus 20. Okay. Now, the next one, Washington Park. Washington Park, I'm definitely not going through every parcel, but this is the area. It's a large area. It's got public uses, it's got industrial, it's got commercial, open space, housing. And just so you know, I forgot to put my most recent project on, which is Garrison Trotter 2. It's not finished yet, but it's 5 parcels, and we'll be adding that to this. It's down towards the bottom. So just to give you an idea, oh wait, the one thing I should say before I start this is Washington Park and in the Roxbury area, we had a number of parcels that we gave out in the 60s. We gave them out to a developer, and then HUD foreclosed on them and gave them back to us. But when we acquired them originally with urban renewal, of course we had the federal money so we could pay the taxes and we could, clear everything. But when we got them back from HUD, they came back with issues, one of which was taxes. So for a number of years, we couldn't develop these because no one could pay the taxes. Even if we just sold it for the tax amount, it was too large. We have recently resolved those issues, and we've gotten all the redemptions on the tax liens, so now we can definitely get them out. So we'll be moving some of those, I believe, for probably housing sites, I'm guessing. But let me give you a flavor for what kind of parcels are here. There's Washington Park Mall, and behind it there is a parking lot, which is on a different, it's I think called A5. I didn't show that though. There's the YMCA's on urban renewal. The Bridge Boston Charter School originally was, I think, a healthcare facility and something else. It went on 2 parcels, and this happened maybe 2 years, in the past 2 years. This was redeveloped. We helped with the charter school as well as the playground, both of them. Malcolm X Park, this is not the part we transferred probably, because we transferred over by where the parking is, and there's, I think, a building on there. But this is the part of the park. Okay, Warren Gardens, this is their open space, that was ours. And then Warren Gardens, the project, it's huge. That was all urban renewal. And as you can see, like you'll see we don't have deed restrictions on this, but this was all affordable housing through the financing in that. Fountain Hill is a deed restricted property that actually was foreclosed upon, so we don't have as many units as we should right now. But I think some more is going to be developed. This is another one that went out for a long time ago. These were all a long time ago. St. Joseph's. Now in St. Joseph's, I think there is one issue we need to resolve on this. I think there's a strip of land. There's some strip of land along Washington Street that I think needs transfer. I've got to check on this. I've been called on this before. Academy Homes. And so as you can see where the residentials are. And we have 2 pages of deed restricted units because they were more developed in the later part. And I don't know it term-wise. Let's see. They're pretty much all 30 plus 20, I think. Yes, they're all 30. Okay. And so that's the end today, but next time we'll be doing Charlestown, Downtown Waterfront, and West End. Charlestown, we've made headway, but we have more to go. So.
Great. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think what's clear is that what we should have worked into the last agreement was that Janet should never be able to retire from the city or the BPDA ever. This is fascinating, a lot of information. It's clear that most of it is just in your head also. So thanks for everything that you do. I was trying to save my questions so we wouldn't get caught along the way. So now I'll try to kind of remember them. So I wanted to start with Park Plaza just because it's small and kind of you can easily grasp, wrap my mind around the different types of scenarios. So just help me understand, for example, with the Four Seasons, even 1 Charles Street, where there was more work that the BRA did. Now that these are basically developed and done, the LDA still exists because the BPDA had conveyed it at some point. But is there any reason to so what does it mean that this is still under urban renewal? Is it just that if somehow, the owners decide they want to, I don't know, financially it doesn't make sense, but if they decided they wanted to knock everything down and start over, then there would still be some public say over what happens there? Is that really it?
That's what we would say, yes. Yeah, but
Okay.
they probably also have zoning. This one's pretty much complete, but we own the China Trade, so I don't know
Yeah.
what the plans are for China Trade.
It's a good one, Madam Chair, to have probably a broader conversation on. I'm happy to have it here as well. And since you've asked, Park Plaza might be the one that right now, superficially, obviously there'd be a process with you and the council, there'd be a process in the neighborhood to consider the future of the Park Plaza urban renewal. But if I had to pick one, and I think if we collectively had to pick one that probably was ripe for termination, it's probably Park Plaza. Because as you point out, most of the redevelopment goals have been accomplished. There are restrictions, and part of the reason we sought the extension for all the urban renewals 2 years ago was because we wanted to make sure we had a granular analysis of each parcel to understand what were the use restrictions, what was the nature of them, what was the duration of them. And once we were comfortable with that analysis and that process, I think we've, again, very preliminarily come to the conclusion that Park Plaza might be ready to go away. But again, there'd be more conversation both here and in the community.
Could the BRA still hold on to China Trade if it goes away?
We wouldn't really have the powers to transfer unless we did a demonstration project.
This goes back to our conversations a couple of years ago with the council, and it's frankly kind of counterintuitive that we could own a piece of property but not dispose of it for redevelopment. But there would have to be a workaround.
To the city or something.
Yes, we would have to come up with a fix for the ultimate ability to control and manage and maybe even dispose of that parcel someday. We don't really have any immediate intent or need to dispose of it. We think the building's providing a whole lot of good for the people of Boston. And again, just as we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned earlier, while the Parcel 12 development proposal that just came in last month envisions a permanent home for the library, the Chinatown branch, we do have a temporary branch that just had its grand opening a couple of weeks ago. So again, a really valued community amenity that we look forward to perpetuating for as long as we can.
And so, for example, just sticking with this example, the Emerson dorms, is there any thought there? I mean, would there be a way to still have some public input or oversight or conversation with that piece if this goes away?
I'm thinking this one probably has the 40 years from the date, which means it goes longer. I'd have to go check to make sure it wasn't one of the 20 years, but I'm thinking it might have the 40 years from...
Do you know what the date?
It was like 2000. It was in the early 2000s, so we might have...
Just as a use restriction?
Yes, as a use restriction.
Okay.
For 40 years.
And the other one, I would think that, well, Kensington would, and I would think also the newer ones are when you'd have the longer terms. I would think 45 Stewart may have it too.
But,
and I'm guessing this Charlestown condominiums, the newer ones should have the longer terms. I'd have to check, because we kind of inched up. We started at like 10, then 20, then we went to 40 and kept it at 40.
And there's no way to, and this applies to what I was thinking about the affordable housing also. So for Councilor Flynn, BPDA was saying earlier that a lot of the affordable housing that's deed restricted and protected through urban renewal has a 30-year time frame plus the option to have a 20-year extension, and a lot of those were in the late 80s or started in the late 80s, so we're coming up on when we need to activate the 20-year extension to keep them there. And is there any way to change those terms now to go even further? Or
I would think the only time is when they bring us to the table and want something from us.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that too.
We also do it. We also do it through refinancing. So if we have regulatory control over the use of some of these properties and they need to come back for financing, they will usually obtain financing from the federal government, HUD, or the state, and then we can add on through that refinance additional years of affordable housing.
Right.
Your concern is a real one to all of us, Councilor, because again, if there's a certain degree of risk there, as Renee points out, we might be able to assert controls that aren't currently there if they come back and petition us for some kind of relief or action. But if they don't come back, if they don't need us, then we're at risk of losing the potential control on the parcel once that term expires.
One of them, Oak Terrace, that's in here, I think we redid it last year. I think we stretched it out to in perpetuity. I'd have to check, but I think we might have.
And so this is at the risk of getting too much into the weeds, and I'm going to pull back up after this. But so, for example, if there were ever an interest, let's say there's a building that has is affordable or deed restricted and come with these terms, if there were some proposal to allow them to put commercial on the first floor instead, right? Let's say it's not there, they could then have some additional revenue stream from that, but then with an agreement to extend the terms of the affordable units above.
So you're thinking of a rental project versus a condo project, because the condos would be sold.
see.
So you're probably talking about, we would, if they came back.
I think that's a possibility.
Are these designated? I think these are
A
probably
lot of
noted
these-
as either rental or condo in the
I
in the
put
summaries.
it
Okay,
which were
great.
condo and which were rental too. A lot of these, the people that own these want to keep them affordable, so they find other sources of money. That's when they come back to us, when they want to rework it, because they have to do capital improvements on the project. They want to keep the affordability. So a lot of these, the goal is to keep it as long as possible.
It's great when we're dealing with an owner that is mission-oriented, that is affordable housing mission-oriented. Minimal risk there as long as it stays in those hands. If the entity is in the business of creating, affordable housing, that's a good landlord for us to be working with regard to perpetuating the affordability. The danger is when that falls into the hands of a landlord who is maybe well within the landlord's rights, but looking at the expiration of the control and then turning the development into market rate housing, which is a real problem, and it manifests itself all the time.
But legal.
Correct.
So how proactive, or do you have the capacity right now, staff-wise, to be proactive in understanding the mindsets of each of these deed restricted?
I can't answer the question if we know whether or not we're dealing, when we just walked through, obviously not even all the urban renewal areas, we walked through a big chunk of them, and there are literally many thousands of affordable units have been created in urban renewal areas using our urban renewal tools. Do we know currently whose hands all of those developments are in and what their intentions might be with regard to perpetuating affordability? I don't know.
Actually, but working with D&D, our housing policy person, Tim Davis, they do work together. They identify projects, properties that have expiring covenants, and they do bring those forward, and then staff starts working with those owners to try to maintain that affordability. What we try to do is get owners to seek other public subsidies for keeping their projects affordable. And so we have, right now, we're working on at least 3 with D&D, And basically it's what city resources are involved or in this project, what BPDA ones are, what federal ones are, what state, and working together, coordinating with other agencies to see what we can do to maintain that Concord House.
You're right. D&D is an invaluable partner for us in this regard because, again, we're talking about affordable units that have been created in urban renewal areas or with urban renewal powers. Obviously, there's a large portfolio of affordable housing in the city that has nothing to do with urban renewal, and many of them are these expiring use, which tend to be quite large residential developments with huge affordability requirements. Those exist independent of urban renewal and outside of urban renewal areas throughout the city. So their expiration and the potential risk of units being lost from an affordability standpoint being lost is a really acute concern. It's been going on for several years because so many of those expiring use mortgages were originally granted in the 60s and 70s for 40 years. So we're in prime time for them to be expiring. So D&D has done really significant work in compiling where the risk is, both within urban renewal areas as well as external to them. And where we can play a role, we're certainly happy to use whatever devices are available to us to help a landlord see their way toward extending the affordability.
Yeah, it just seems that there might be an opportunity as you're interacting with them anyway to trigger the extension to have the conversation about after that. Okay, I will just ask one more before turning it over, and then I have more, but I don't want to hog the microphone. Okay. So just to review at a big picture level, the milestones and the deadlines, so starting from when DHCD approved urban renewal in August 2016, there was a 2-year plan, or sorry, a 2-year milestone to be done with the LDA inventory, right? So that would be August 2018. Do you feel you're on track to finish them by then?
I think we do, yes.
Okay, and then the next one after that was at the 3-year mark, so August of 2019, to have some sense of then what will happen with boundaries and what the request would be. So that would, and you mentioned the 4 steps of finishing the inventory, figuring out how to give public access to it, doing the title audit, and then having the conversation around boundaries. Is that
correct? Yeah. We still feel, I think, as of right now, we don't know what bumps in the road could occur, but as of right now, we feel we're on track to meet those deadlines and those commitments.
And what public process, or I guess how long of a public process do you anticipate before seeking the boundaries, or the 3-year deadline should have some built-in time to be engaging with community about getting public feedback on boundaries and changing and all that too?
I don't know if we...
I think our plan was first to come up with recommendations really at the staff level, and then working with DHCD as well as our planners to figure out what that should look like, and then working also with the city in terms of what the process would look like, because I don't think that we can answer that until we know sort of what is in front of us for those recommendations.
Similar to the way we approach the urban renewal extension conversation that took place here in late 14 through 16, when we ultimately received the extension from the state in August 2016. We engaged the council, obviously the mayor's office, and Mayor Walsh is an enthusiast for community engagement and community process on these sort of rather weighty matters of urban renewal, where they belong, where they don't belong, where we should contract the boundaries. So I think what we do is once we sift through all this data that is being mined continuously on these parcels and the land use restrictions associated with them, we try to discern what we think makes the most sense, engage the council, engage obviously the mayor's office, and then identify a path forward for a broader community engagement to see if the wishes of the community jibe with what we're at least superficially thinking. So I think both the substance of that process and its duration, we'd be happy to engage with others, and we'd like to be informed as to what you think makes sense too. We obviously had, I think fundamentally, it could be bumpy, a good experience with the urban renewal conversation, both in City Hall as well as out in the neighborhoods. And I think we'd expect to replicate something like that for the identifying the adjustment of boundaries associated with the current urban renewal areas.
And the state DHCD is requiring that we do come up with a plan, and they will review it and approve it. So they will require us to do the community process, the city process as well.
Great. Yeah, I suppose all I'm saying is that I'm trying to, in terms of what I'm thinking of, what the deadlines and milestones should be, that even though there's the sort of August 2019 final deadline, that really it should be the, sort of internal consensus should be arrived at much earlier to be able to go out and get that community feedback for some time before then.
Understood. I'm sorry, are we, I'm asking my staff now, are we tracking that the community process would occur before August 2019, or would?
I was thinking not. I was thinking.
Okay,
Oh,
that's where I'm
so
hung
this is
up. But
helpful
if
to
I'm wrong,
figure this out.
I'm.
So what exactly
Right.
is due August 2019?
Okay, so what I thought we were doing is the LDAs first, then we have to do the title, because you need
Yes.
both of them to
Yes.
see what's left.
Yes.
So I thought we were going to finish these, then do the title, and then we evaluate what it looks like we can do. Then there'd have to be a process after that, but we have to evaluate it. And I
Well,
thought
so
that-
August 2018 is the sort of soft deadline for the inventory being done, which seems you're on track to finish that late spring, so being ahead of
Right.
schedule.
But we need it for a title, I know.
Right, so then there's the title piece, which will take, I have no idea how long. But my understanding was that August 2019, at the 3-year mark, is when DHCD needed to see your intentions for whether there would be a further extension past 2022 and/or any boundary changes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, to get to your initial point on 2019, I'm looking at one of our documents, so I said it was the board memorandum for approval of the action plan. And after we received city council extension support, it looks like we committed within 3 years of the approval by DHCD, the state, we committed to submit a plan associated with further extensions and redrawing the lines of urban renewal. So I think the way we interpret this is we will have a description of what we seek to do by summer of 2019. Not that we will complete that plan by 2019, but that we will present it to you and DHCD. Here's what we propose to do with regard to a community conversation about urban renewal borders, that's what we expect to present to you in DHCD by the middle of next year, as opposed to having had that conversation already by the summer of 2019.
So sorry, I should have brought I'm just remembering in my head based off the letter from DHCD, and I'll just double check it, but that sounds like it could be correct. And either way, there's time at the next 6 months check-in to figure out exactly what that means and nail that out. So I'll flag that for myself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just so I'm not looking at the DHCD letter, I'm looking at a board memorandum from our agency in which we described our commitment.
But it mirrors the letter, so it should.
Right.
Okay, so I'll pause and hand it over to Councillor Flynn, who's been very patient with me for his questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the BPDA staff for being here. Thank you, Director. I had the opportunity during the summertime to visit Mass Pike Towers, parcel R5, and I believe that's one of the developments that's expiring, or there's some type of issue as it relates to possibly a sale of that property or the impact it would have on the residents. Could you give me a little bit of background information on it, just so that I'm clear about it? Was it one of those developments that the deed would expire, or a potential sale?
Yes, can you give me 1 moment, please?
Just a moment, Councillor.
Okay.
I thought you were going to confer.
Okay.
So, the community, I think it was in 120 and it was never effectuated. But in the deed, the community there was some reverter back to the community, like it went to the developer, it reverts back to the community if it's not So we're working with them. I know the city contacted us too. Okay. Thank you, Counselor. So I'm going to have to get you some specific information on this, but I believe Mass Pike Towers was originally an urban renewal parcel, also a Chapter 121A project, where there were some regulatory controls whereby the property was given to a developer to be put out for affordable housing, and that there was a reverter in one of those controls where if the housing goes away, it goes back to the community so that it could be put back out. However, the time to exercise that option expired before they were able to do so. So we are working with the city right now to figure out how we would, what regulatory controls we have left, what leverage, so that we can reassess and try to bring that project back in for development for affordable housing.
No, thank you for your answer. Just speaking to some of those residents, it was clear that they love living in that neighborhood. A lot of elderly, as you know, a lot of disabled. Big connection to the Chinatown community. Yeah. So that's I'm glad the BPDA and the mayor's office is making progress on that. Thank you.
And that's one that D&D is also, we're working with them. So it's a good partnership to figure out what resources we have to keep that affordable.
Are there any other developments in Chinatown that the tenants or the residents are in jeopardy of being evicted because of those types of situations?
We'd have to double check. The ones that I know that we're actively working on now, especially the ones with the city, the ones I'm thinking of are in the south end. So I don't know of any specific ones in Chinatown, but we have our housing folks that we can go back to and double check, or at least they can look at the list of when they know that they need to be thinking about the expiring use on those.
Okay.
Again, Councilor, our housing staff is knit together very tightly with the Department of Neighborhood Development's housing staff, and we share information. Frankly, the broader assessment of the state of affordable housing in the city is handled primarily through D&D, but we can get with D&D and determine what they're tracking as far as an at-risk affordability population, and we'll get that to you immediately once we discern where the danger and where the threats are to affordability.
Thank you, Director. And I just want to compliment also BPDA and the Mayor's Office for outstanding work on the temporary library in Chinatown. Though that's important for the neighborhood. It's about treating that neighborhood with respect, and I want to say thank you to your staff and to the Mayor's Office for doing that, for working hard with the neighborhood. That's great progress, and you know, if there's anything I can do to be helpful in locating or building a permanent library in Chinatown, I'd love to be involved in that. So I want to say thank you to your office.
Thank you for your kind words, Councilor. As you know, the Chinatown branch has been absent from the Chinatown neighborhood since, I think, the late 50s. And Mayor Walsh committed to establishing library services in Chinatown. We're thrilled to be the landlord and to host this really important and long overdue community amenity. There was a grand opening a couple weeks ago, and there were hundreds of people there. So there's a lot of excitement in the community about the library having, at least for the next few years, a home at our China Trade property. We're certainly very happy to be part of that story, and we're looking forward to helping as the real estate development permitting agency for the city, citing a development or ultimately approving a development that provides a permanent home. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, parcel we own, parcel 12, is under consideration right now. We have a development partnership that submitted a proposal in January. As part of that proposal submitted now 2 months ago, in January, we're in March, they committed to community space that ideally will house a permanent branch of the library. So we're hoping that proves out and bears fruit with regard to this proposal, and we'll certainly be watching it, considering it closely, as well as the community will certainly be watching it and considering it closely as we analyze this proposal that's been submitted to us. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. On parcel R2A Tai Tung Park, I had the opportunity during the summertime also to attend the opening of that. I think it's a great addition to the Chinatown community. It's great progress. It's on page 49.
It's been there a while. They must have just redone it. It looks really nice.
They did redo it. My issue would be, as we factor in these issues, can we also factor in that Chinatown has limited space, but there's limited parks there, open space for the residents, and that's one of the major concerns I had as I visit Chinatown almost every day. But they would like to see more open space. They would like to see more parks. If we're able to factor that in as we consider this this discussion, that would be important for the neighborhood to have more parks. And the one at Tai Tung there is, as you can see, is very small. And that'd be important for the neighborhood if that would be a major consideration.
Sure. So, Councilor, you're right. That is one of the most densely populated, both from a residential standpoint as well as commercial and institutional. It's an extremely dense neighborhood. It's very small in built, almost every square inch. So when we engage a developer with a proposal in Chinatown, we do it with a keen eye toward identifying the possibility of open space. There isn't much that's vast over there, but even where we can score a win, again, working with our sister agency, the Department of Parks and Recreation, we try to identify even a pocket park such as Tai Tung is a really big win when those things can occur. So it's front and center in our consideration when we confront the potential for new development in Chinatown.
Thank you, Director. And the final point I had as it relates to Chinatown, I know I mentioned the library, but above the library, as you know, is the Urban College that's doing excellent work in the neighborhood as well. They're providing great services to not only the Chinatown community, but throughout Boston. And those types of educational programs are excellent. If we can also factor that type of program in as we continue this debate and making sure that those without, access to traditional educational opportunities can experience training and education in that type of environment right in the neighborhood. So I just want to say thank you to the BPDA, Urban College. Michael Taylor is the director there. But I just wanted to pass along. I went through a walking tour, and they're doing excellent work there.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. And I've been over multiple times. A lot of staff has spent time there. Again, we are the owner of the building. The mayor's been over multiple times in recent months. It's a tremendous success story, not just as a business proposition for us as owner and landlord, but because of the services it provides. As you identify, the Urban College and then the International Institute, which is primarily an immigrant population, that both of these institutions furnish services to hundreds of people who tend to be low income, people of color, and to be able to provide these opportunities, which are really meaningful in helping them get a leg up in life and a leg up on the economic ladder, is really important. So not only is the building performing and as a business proposition, we're able to give affordable, reasonably priced space in our building, but the fruit that it bears citywide by providing these opportunities to a population that is very often vulnerable in this city in 2018 is a really big win for us as far as a social and economic justice gain for that vulnerable population. So we're proud of that, and thanks for your kind words.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. So I just wanted to follow up briefly on this. So thank you to Rich Giordano. I had the letter with him from DHCD. It sounds like it's the same as the BRA memo, but the point I was mentioning, it says, within 3 years of the date of this approval, BRA will submit to DHCD a proposal for what the BRA intends to do with its urban renewal plans over the remaining years of the 6-year extension, describing, with respect to each plan, a timetable for sunsetting the applicable plans, an analysis as to whether it should remain as drawn or be modified with an explanation as to why, and a framework and timetable for action in any areas where the BRA is proposing or not proposing to seek an additional extension. So I guess it comes down to the word, what the word proposal means. And I guess the way that I read this initially was that this is the point at which DHCD would want to see the major, what the plan for what will happen over the next 3 years, and either the wind down or an explanation. And if there's, I would love to hear if this leaves room for a significantly different plan to be submitted after that, because if there's going to be a public process after that, but this is really supposed to be when the meat of it submitted, there's no point in having public process if nothing's going to change.
No. The intent behind that, when we were working with DHCD, was to come up with our recommendations for where we think we're headed, and then how we're going to get there. And how we're going to get there is the public process. So it doesn't mean it's going to be done by the 19th. It's just that's the plan we're coming up with them.
But you're saying that you would have submitted where you're headed and filling in how you're going to get there. But what if the public wants to have feedback into where you're headed?
I see the ambiguity here.
Yeah, as I said, if there's time to talk about this at the next session, it would be great. I'm just flagging this if we can dive into more details and maybe talk with DHCD about what they mean. Where is so for example, if you say we're going to eliminate 2 out of the 14 plans, just hypothetically, but then the public actually says we want 3 eliminated or we want none eliminated, is there room with this language to say after the 3-year mark, we're going to come up with an entirely new plan? And that's what I would want to have clarified.
Yeah, as I read this exact language with you, which it sounds like mirrors our board memo, I think there's some ambiguity that we need to clear up with you and with DHCD about what exactly we're giving to DHCD next August. Because you're right, if it's a mature plan, clearly there would need to be a public process leading up to that. We're not going to be proposing a mature plan for the way forward next summer to DHCD if there hasn't been a public process. But at the same time, what concerns me is we have so much homework still to do, as Janet mentioned, inventorying the LDAs and then making sure the title is examined and clear. So that plus a community process, all culminating by August 2019. I suppose it is possible. Doable, very, 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 very densely packed. Whole lot going on there over the next 16 months, if that's what the goal and the requirement is. We certainly want to live with our commitment, but we want to do this right with the community.
Well, so then it would be, let's keep this on the agenda for the next check-in, but it'd be helpful in between then to understand from DHCD what they mean by how finalized
No, thank you for flagging the issue. I think we all want to be on we want a meeting of the minds on timetable.
Perfect. Okay, so I just had 2 minor final questions. One on the urban renewal overlay designation that Janet was discussing. So very interesting that so this is basically a tool to create or change zoning that you said is just done through the BRA or through the BPDA. Are there other places besides, was it Washington Park?
Yes, they can be used all over.
So they can be used, are there any other places you anticipate using that, or is there any notification when that is used to any other agencies or the public?
Zoning Commission.
It goes through a process with zoning, so we're the, we'd have to go through a process, then we'd have to recommend it to the zoning commission, and the zoning commission would have a public hearing on it.
Okay.
So it's got a process.
Okay. So there's still the whole a set of hearings and.
To answer your question, we don't have, we're not currently considering that I know of a new U district anywhere.
Okay.
And if there is, there will be a significant public conversation because, as you know, this device has really significant effects. We can do a lot with this if the device is exercised. So before we ever did that, there would be a robust public process, not just at the BPDA, but before the zoning commission. But to answer your question, I don't know that I am not aware of considering a U district right now.
Okay, great. And so just because the weight and the power of it is that it essentially streamlines a lot of the community or public process to get to zoning.
Right, but can I make one comment? You also still have to go through Article 80 and everything. So like with this one, the Crescent parcel, it's got other parcels in there, but they'll all have to go through Article 80 too.
Got it.
So.
Okay. And then on public access to the LDA inventory, I know when we had discussed it earlier, right now the zoning viewer will have a little flag to say there's an urban renewal component to this. Please contact the agency for more information. And after the inventory is done, you're working towards being able to just directly get everything, give online access?
Correct. I'm sorry, am I? No.
No, and I have
Will
an
the
example.
documents be linked in some way online directly at some point?
To the registry?
Yes.
Sorry,
Or to
I'm
wherever
sorry.
the LDA
I'm sorry.
language lives.
So the agency has had this conversation with the council off and on for the past couple of years. And honestly, my aspiration, I think our aspiration collectively, was that the ideal, as far as informing the public about where there's an LDA and what the LDA requires, so they can see with their own eyes, optimally, you'd have that flagged on our zoning viewer, and you would be able to link to the documents, ideally at the Registry of Deeds, where they are. Over the past year, since we've been working this issue from both a technical standpoint and a legal standpoint, we're very concerned about the difficulty connecting to the Registry of Deeds in a meaningful fashion. First of all, we have to establish and maintain the link. But the complexity of the documents that you would be linking to, and in most cases, you wouldn't be just linking to a single page that tells you here's the LDA and here's what it requires. It might be dozens of documents associated with the deed restriction. We believe that from a technical standpoint, it's frankly too difficult to do that. And from a legal standpoint, not that necessarily I think we'd be concerned about liability, that we've sent you to the wrong place. It's going to be, everyone's own duty to figure out what they're looking at and whether they're looking at the right things and sufficient. It's more, we feel we'd breed more confusion because the complexity of the number of documents and the complexity of the terms of the documents is ultimately not going to provide meaningful information the way we thought it could. Because again, superficially, the way I was approaching this personally and as an attorney, I still thought it was probably easy enough to form the link from our webpage to the Registry of Deeds, one-stop shopping through a click. I'm assured by our technical folks and our legal folks, it is nowhere near that simple and ultimately would probably breed far more frustration. So what we thought made the most sense as far as providing meaningful information, not just data, but informing people in a way that they can make sense of what they're looking at, is when they identify through our zoning viewer a parcel with an LDA, that they can immediately email our staff, and our staff will respond with the documents and provide them with some guidance as to how these documents work together.
And is there capacity to, so right now you're emailing them PDFs or links, to, I mean,
I would
maybe
think,
maybe no
I would
one's
think you're
requested
right.
it yet.
I would
but
think you're right. It's probably both those things.
emails and links and an additional commentary on how to read this.
I think we should speak to them. I brought an example.
Okay.
It's an LDA. I wrote this up. It's a deed infill project. 14 parcels went out under one deed in LDA, 6 amendments. There's been 2 releases, various deed restrictions. I had a really difficult time figuring out at each case with a unit what was covering it. So, I mean, we definitely need a conversation. The simple ones like the backyards, the problem there is what area does it cover, because they probably consolidated their assessing parcels. So, I mean, so they need a conversation. I think we need to talk to them, besides providing documents. And we aren't their ultimate, you know, legal, but just to kind of step in and give them the documents, but explain kind of.
Okay. I guess I hate in any way in this sort of knowledge economy and with today's technology to be telling people you have access to the information, but only if you ask us. And then we need to, I understand that there's an extra piece where we have to walk folks through something, or maybe it requires a certain level of expertise or foundational knowledge to be able to interpret it. But for people who do want it, and maybe the universe of folks we're talking about is relatively small, I just feel like there has to be some other way where they don't have to email. What if the staff person is out, or, you know, it just.
Well, we have files in each, obviously, to get to that point, we have a file on each parcel and all the information. And I think if someone just says, I just want the documents, I don't want any explanation, I mean, then we just give them the documents. But for other people, I think it would be really helpful for them to have a short conversation with us still.
Yeah, well,
but there might be some that just want the documents.
Right, and so the
they can just
ideal,
click
I
and say,
think-
send me the documents, and we
The
can do
ideal, I
that.
think, should still be people can access the documents directly, and maybe the flag is, please call us for more context or information. But with everything that we do on the council or in general, I think the goal should always be to let people have what they are looking for, and if they have more questions, ask us after that.
Yeah, I don't know the technology part, if that's a problem, but I know from the legal part, I can't imagine some of the ones I've read. People
But we already have separate files for each parcel, and it would just, and right now, we're essentially emailing them over the file as opposed to just making the file accessible in order just to have that, require that conversation.
Question, can it even, I mean, there's lots of documents too, that's the problem.
Yeah, it might be valuable. I don't know how much time you want to dedicate to this, either at the next session
Okay.
or in a special
that'd be
conversation to talk about this. But it might be helpful to have our IT people in
That would
on it
be
as
great.
well,
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
talk about the difficulty
Okay,
of making this link happen in an effective way.
okay, wonderful. So I'll keep
We're
those two on the
very
agenda.
much committed to
No, I
to what
understand.
you are, and
Exactly.
I thought superficially when we first started having this conversation maybe a couple of years ago that this was going to be easy enough. But every time we have the conversation internally, I have a catalog of concerns associated with the hurdles to providing meaningful information to people through this click over to the registry of deeds.
Yeah.
It sounds superficially like it should work and maybe even work rather easily, and I'm assured right and left that that is not the case.
Well, even if, I don't know what the files are right now, if it's literally a file folder, but even just digitizing that and having that as one PDF for each parcel, I know it's a ton of work, but that would be a technological workaround, right? Unless it changes right, as things are being updated. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. We had no folks from the public signed up to testify. Oh, okay, we have one person. Come on down forward.
I signed up, but it was
Oh, sorry.
too late to get up front. Hi, I'm Ford Cavallari. I'm the chair of ADCO, which is the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations. The 9 largest resident associations in Boston comprise the ADCO footprint, if you will. I wanted to compliment the BPDA management. I have to say, I am continually impressed by the senior management team of the BPTA, which I think is one of the best in the city in terms of the depth of knowledge and the detail with which they are thinking through a lot of issues. But I do want to echo some of Michelle's comments. Your great strength of this depth of knowledge of the 4 people at the table is also one of your greatest weaknesses, because there's so much knowledge inside everyone's head. And it would be great to figure out out a way via IT or whatever to get it into a form that someone could query without necessarily having to take up senior management time, as you guys are doing a lot of other things. I wanted to, to that point, I wanted to point out, some ideas, because the LDA inventory, I mean, as Councilor Wu can attest, I am probably one of the biggest aficionados of receiving telephone book size reports of information. I love it, but not too many people are in my category. Most people would actually love to see a tabular form of the LDAs. And I actually think a tabular format that elicits some of the information would be much more helpful, because there are key issues like dates. So let's ask, what are the key things you want to keep track of? You want to keep track of the dates. You want to keep track of the type of set-asides. Is it affordable housing? Is it workforce housing? Is it community space? Is it some infrastructure commitment that the folks have made? Is it a nursing home or elder care facility? And these are very important. I'll recall the BPDA was very helpful in saving our North End nursing home, which partners wanted to sell, and we intercepted it because there was an LDA that mandated a nursing home use, and so we were able to navigate a solution that worked for everyone. But it was excruciatingly hard to actually find that out, and that's one of those things that you would want to have, pop right up in some sort of tabular inventory. And also, I've heard a couple of times people have said, well, we missed the deadline and this has expired. To keep track of those dates and have them pulled out and not buried in a PDF file that no one, actually, after this inventory is going to complete, no one is going to remember or go back to, and you're going to miss more dates. So, having that IT discussion, I think, is really important. And I would also, I'm going to throw out a compliment to another city organization. ISD and Chris English are running an RFI process for the, they described yesterday in the Airbnb short-term rental database, so that they can coordinate all of the different online platforms and have them feed into a Boston platform. And they're actually thinking about exactly what are those data elements that we need to extract. And it might be useful to talk to those guys too, because they're going through this whole data schema kind of let's say visualization of what the data is, what are the important data elements. And I would really love to have a conversation about that, because I think that could make this a process, this inventory process, that rather than creating some files that no one ever looks at, or a select few look at, could actually create something that actually helps the entire process, makes it so we never have a neighborhood that worries about losing a nursing home or loses affordable housing. The last thing I wanted to ask also is, having just come from the North End, actually having come late because I needed to make sure that my car wouldn't be flooded parking on the street, because we are inundating right now, and we are in an urban renewal zone. And I wanted to ask if in urban renewal zones there are maybe any infrastructure requirements that could be mandated, if the urban renewal zone gives you any extra powers to help us fix some of the issues. Boston remains one of the few major cities that has a unified storm drain and sewage system. Most cities our size have split them, and they split them long ago. We haven't done that. That's just one example of infrastructure failing in our city, and it would be great to know that the urban renewal zones, if they're going to continue, serve the greater good of transportation and infrastructure for the residents, as well as the guiding the developers in what they can and cannot do. That is my question and my comments, and thank you very much. And a good job on BPDA's part.
Oh, okay. We'll have Rich come down and then turn it over any final feedback or comments.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to at least add 2 cents in. My name is Richard Giordano. I work at Fenway Community Development Corporation. I'd just like to pick up on Mr. Cavallari's suggestion. I think some of the BRA staff know that CDAC, the Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation, tracks expiring use properties, and they keep it on a watch list. But for people like me, they do it in a very simple format on a table, and they just have the address of the property, the date of expiration, the number of units, privately owned, and what's going on. And, you know, in terms of a quick summary for other folks that probably help the BRA, you know, track and manage and stay on top of all of these things, the way Ford was saying with the North End. That stuff that they do, it's clear, simple, and fast, and it would probably help all of us. And I think it might go back to Councilor Flynn's question about expiring use properties, because CDAC is tasked with tracking them, and they put out a hot watch list of expiration dates. And so maybe I should send the link to the councilor afterwards. But just that style is great for us lay people. So thank you for holding the hearing, and thank you all for testifying. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Rich. All right, thank you. Please go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Mr. Cavalieri and Mr. Giordano for their comments. When I listen to Mr. Cavalieri, I feel like I'm listening to the words in my own head, because his observations about making information more readily available, but also tracking it and storing it in a cohesive place where we can identify the material provisions of all that we do and track relevant dates and requirements. We've had conversations with the council multiple times about that in recent years, about our own effort to take an agency that was created in 1957 and has, for most of its history, well up to the present day, been operating fundamentally as an analog agency in a digital world. We're transforming that. We've done really significant work in the past 4 years to bring this into the 21st century, and I think a lot of people have sort of saluted that work. Our IT department has transformed this analog agency into a far more sophisticated entity that uses information technology appropriately. But are we where we want to be yet? No. We've made significant progress tracking our leases digitally, the material provisions of leases, so that we know we're enforcing those leases, particularly with regard to revenue that had been missed in the past when relying just on monitoring hard copy analog forms. That world has changed, but we've got to make sure that same approach to IT pervades everything we do, so that, as Mr. Cavalieri pointed out, dates, key requirements are easily accessible, not just by the agency. I mean, we've been working on that first and foremost, making sure we know what our documents require of us as well as the development community. Maybe going back decades, we're working hard at that, but we also want to make sure the public has access to that same information. So we're all on the same sheet of music, and we're spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, a whole lot of resources on information technology to make sure we get there. And again, I know this doesn't necessarily address the concern associated with IT. We're committed to this two-track solution, do as much as we can through IT to provide information, but also make sure we have human beings ready to go to answer. And that's why we have Allison Quinn here with us today, because Allison has done most of the work that we just all talked about. It's really Allison and Janet Carlson. But Allison's job is working urban renewal and LDA issues. And anybody who's interested in what we've already discerned about the LDAs, the documents and what the documents require, Allison is an extremely important resource to be tapped, and I'd welcome Mr. Cavalieri and anyone else who is interested in having those conversations about where these things are, what they require, what properties they impact. We have an awful lot of information already at our fingertips, so we can continue to use the analog and the human world at the same time that we use information technology in a more robust fashion. And finally, again, I appreciate Mr. Giordano highlighting the work of CDAC in tracking affordable housing risks, primarily with regard to expiring use mortgages, again, which probably speak to thousands of affordable units throughout the city. So the CDAC, while a non-governmental entity, is a really valuable partner in this effort. My bet is, our housing division looks at that frequently, as well as D&D. My impression is D&D would probably be using that information to flag issue as well. But thanks to Mr. Giordano for highlighting that. And again, thank you for your time and your colleagues' time.
Great. Thank you so much. So we will convene in another 6 months, and this will conclude today's hearing on docket 0267, order that the Boston Planning and Development Agency continue biannual urban renewal updates to the Boston City Council. This hearing is adjourned.